everyone, welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Liz Steblay. Now, a little bit about Liz. She's sometimes called the Yoda of solopreneur success, and as we can see on the screen, she isn't small and green or hundreds of years old. But who knows what will happen with health, research, science in the next few years. We might be living hundreds of years old and go green because we've been trained by AI. Who knows? But anyway, she's been a wise mentor to thousands of self-employed professionals, helping them realize their dreams of becoming solo entrepreneurs with decades of experience building their own solopreneur career. And we're going to get her to define what a solopreneur means because it's quite long. And I'm sure it's got multiple meanings, but we're going to find out what she thinks it is, including founding a national talent agency that made the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies in the US twice. Liz has distilled the formula for a solopreneur success down to 6 essential keys in her best-selling book, Succeeding as a Solopreneur, which she published in partnership with Inc. magazine in March. Liz explains how these keys are crucial for overcoming FUD, not Elmer Fudd, just FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and paving the way for long-term success. So, Liz, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here and happy to answer all your questions, including what is a solopreneur and what the hell is FUD and anything you want to ask.
Okay, so what got you into all this? In other words, becoming a consultant, and there's a couple of sort of like accidental synergies that happened along the way. So tell us how you just stumbled into being a consultant, which is essentially what you are doing today. But let's start maybe with, tell us what a solopreneur is, and then we're going to work backwards and hear about your journey to get to being a solopreneur.
Okay, so we can do a little bit of time traveling in this conversation.
Yep.
So I fell into being a self-employed consultant before the word solopreneur was ever invented. And it was quite, as you said, an accidental, or my words, fortuitous happenstance. Maybe it was even fate, whatever word you want to call it. So at the time I was working as a full-time, sort of full-time director at Levi Strauss, the makers of the Levi jeans. And I got laid off. And I called a former client that I had when I had worked for one of the global consulting firms. It was the very same day I got the notice that I was laid off. And I said, hey, Rob, I just got laid off. Do you need any help down there? Because he was in Silicon Valley. I was in San Francisco. And he said, are you kidding? How soon can you get here? And I literally had my first consulting project before I even had a laptop. In fact, I went down there, had a conversation with Rob. We talked about all the different projects and things that were happening at that high-tech company. And he's like, great. Okay, let's hire you to do this one. And I said, can you walk me over to the IT department? Because I want to stop by Mike Peters' desk and have him help me pick out a laptop. And we ordered my laptop on Mike's desk that very same day. So when I say I fell into it, I literally fell into it. Wasn't really even thinking. It was just a gut reaction like, oh, well, maybe I'll just do a little consulting work on the side. But that first year I made more money, lowered my effective tax rate, worked fewer hours, didn't have to deal with the big firm BS that I used to when I was internal with the global firm. And more importantly, I had more quality time with my kid. And I said, well, this is great. Everybody should be doing this. And I'm not going back to a real job.
Mm. Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it, today? You mentioned the word laptop, which we all use today. And laptops really only started coming into existence in the late 80s. Was that when you bought your first laptop? Was it in the late 80s? Or was it early 90s?
This was in the this was actually in the early 2000s, because prior to that, my companies had always paid for my laptops.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, I had the desktop computer at home or whatever, but my work was always done on a laptop that was paid for. Levi Strauss gave me one, or the big firm I used to work for, PwC Consulting, they'd give me a new one every 18 months. So the first one I ever purchased was that day in early 2004.
Right. Okay. So things have changed a lot since then, haven't they? Like,
Oh my goodness. Yes, they have. The
yeah,
internet was barely even a thing.
yeah. When I bought my first computer, actually, we had local area networks that were just emerging, which connected computers within the office. But essentially, there was really nothing to connect offices to other offices remotely,
Right?
yeah, unless you did some really sexy sort of technology workarounds. And so we've sort of gone from standalone computers that were sort of quite good. We could do spreadsheets, but we really couldn't share it with anyone. So today we have the web's just, and then smartphones on top of that,
Yes.
is,
And it's insane. Like sometimes uh so so I leave webinars and workshops from my laptop here in my home office. I came down one day and the internet wasn't working. So I rebooted the router, still wasn't working. And by this time, I'm 20 minutes before the webinar is supposed to start. I'm like, okay, I don't have time to dink around with this. So
mm,
I opened my smartphone
mm.
using 5G service, nearest free Wi-Fi near me. And I grabbed my laptop, went to the nearest coffee shop, and I led the workshop from the patio of that coffee shop. I mean, even 10 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to do that.
No. Well, the other thing too is like in the past, we actually had to use technology called Skype, which is
I
got,
remember.
yeah. And Skype was quite good. And you could do free calls on it. And then, basically here we are today using Zoom, right? Which
Exactly.
essentially has made Skype look a little irrelevant and a little bit lazy and a little bit like legacy software, really. So, but yeah, and doing this on Zoom is so easy. It's like click, open up. I do a quick audio test, video test, hit record, ready to go. And
Yes.
so it's pretty close to bulletproof. Occasionally we get a little bit of glitch and yeah, sure, that's going to happen. But the World Wide Web is basically like a utility service. It's like electricity, isn't it? You expect it to work
Yes. I would I
24/7.
would rather be without um, air conditioning than the internet.
Okay.
Uh, but yes, it is like a utility. But all of these, technologies and apps and things like Zoom, or I did a virtual summit this last weekend using a tool called StreamYard where I was allowed backstage. And I mean, it makes it all so easy to step out on your own
Mm.
because you don't need the infrastructure. Now, I'm not going to say that it's always perfect or easy. I mean, there's no help desk that I can call. Like that day I came down and the internet wasn't working, couldn't just call the help desk. Or when I get the blue screen of death on my laptop, I don't have anybody on call. So there are challenges when you're self-employed,
Mm.
but you don't need to have a big firm behind you to do the work that you love to do and make a great living.
Yeah. And the pandemic actually accelerated remote work, I'd say, by about a decade.
I agree.
We were heading in that direction, but getting permission was always difficult because, it was the old, theory of management by walking around. In other words, people, the manager walks around and goes, okay, who's on Facebook? Who's on Instagram?
Exactly.
Who's,
Who's spending too much time in the break room? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
who's bloody gaming today? Yeah,
Hmm.
because the bandwidth's gone up. Look, no, so the reality is that remote work now has become something that is been shown to be that generally it's been shown to be more productive. People are more productive doing remote work than actually going into the office. And so, my partner, she's a corporate lawyer, she's still required to go into the office. Quite a few people still work remotely, but she spends like an hour getting dressed, half an hour getting to the office, then getting back at the end of the day. So we can wipe out 2 to 3 hours by the time you mess around, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I totally agree.
yeah,
And that's time that you could be spending exercising or with your children or coaching Little League or whatever it is that you want to do besides commuting and going to an office.
yeah. So let's go to one of the original questions asked, which is the one of two. Define what a solopreneur is, and I'd be interested in. And we've talked about consultants. Okay, so they are a type of solopreneur. So, what's your definition of a solopreneur?
So a solopreneur, similar to the word entrepreneur, is a person who is in business for themselves. But obviously with the word solo, they are literally in business for themselves, and they really are not interested in growing to be a business more than themselves. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have a virtual assistant or a social media planner on a part-time basis or anything, but you're not particularly interested in growing the business into something larger.
Mm,
Uh, I don't know any solopreneurs that produce a widget or a product, unless it might be, download this ebook or take this online course, right? But we're not manufacturing products. They're nearly all knowledge workers. And that could be anything from, we talked about management consultants, life coaches, executive coaches, financial planners, interior designers. All of those fall under solopreneurs.
mm,
So you're employed by yourself, for yourself. You want to do the work that you love, outsource the stuff you don't. Like for me, it's social media, um, calendaring with my virtual assistant, and bookkeeping. I outsource all that. And
mhm.
I just do the work that I enjoy doing, and I don't have to deal with a boss or big firm BS. But there is, of course, the challenge of business development and developing a pipeline and finding clients and contracting and all of those other things. And that's the type of stuff that's in my book.
Okay. So tell us then, okay, because for consultants, it is that sort of that funnel of opportunity, because quite often it can be with a consultant, it can be feast and famine.
Oh, yes.
So quite often with consulting, you can get a really decent gig, but then you're so busy you don't have time to actually then work on the pipeline. And then the problem then is getting the sequence right. And so that, you got one job after the other. Tell us how you manage that, how you build a pipeline for you as a consultant, and how do you make sure that you don't have feast and famine? Is it like you run multiple jobs? Tell us about how you actually build that funnel and produce opportunity, and then how you manage it.
Yes, it depends on the type of work you do, of course.
Mhm.
Some people can juggle more than one client at a time, particularly if you're in coaching, you have to juggle multiple clients at a time. But
Yep.
as a consultant, it depends on the type of work you do. The type of work I used to do was change management strategy and implementation for big, hairy tech projects, like implementing SAP for a company with 200,000 employees. Um, that's full-time work. It's
Yes.
either 40, if not 40 hours, it can peak at 60 hours. So there was no way that I was ever going to be able to have more than one client at a time. And in fact, after that first project that I did, after I left Levi Strauss, fell into independent consulting, I was caught flat-footed because I hadn't done any business development. I didn't even know what the word pipeline meant. And so I really had to hustle because I knew I didn't want to go back to work for a consulting firm. And actually, this is key number 3 in my book, which is about it says constantly grow and nourish your network. So even if you are working 40 to 60 hours a week on one client, you need to dedicate at least 1 hour a week to growing and nourishing your network. In my world, when I was on these intense projects, that meant having lunch or a drink after work with one person in person once a week.
Hmm.
Even if it was only to walk down to the sandwich shop and walk back to our desk because we couldn't afford the time to actually sit in a restaurant. That's how I kept nourishing and expanding my network. And on that work, we weren't on those walks to pick up the lunch. We weren't talking about work. I was finding out about where they went to school. What did they do when they're not working? Why did they work so hard? Where did they go on their last vacation? Do they have kids? What sports are they interested in? And I develop a relationship.
Mm.
So when you're self-employed as a solopreneur, the relationships are key. In fact, one of my favorite blog article I think I've ever written, and I've written several dozen by this point, it says business development equals relationship development,
Hmm.
because people are going to hire a solopreneur that they know is credible, who they
Hmm.
like, and who they trust.
Yep.
And you have to start with relationships. So I know that you spend a lot of time on this show talking about digital marketing and building pipelines and funnels and lead magnets and newsletters. That's all great, but every single solopreneur gets hired by first having a conversation with a potential client.
Yep.
So everything, all of your marketing stuff needs to funnel into, let's have a live conversation.
Yep.
And then it's about building the relationship.
Exactly. So there lies a bit of the challenge with remote work, as in you are removed from the physicality of networking in some sense. So how do you combine essentially digital networking with face-to-face networking? Because they're different, aren't they? Do you do both?
Yes. Yes, they are different. And now you can do both. There were a couple of years there when you couldn't, like 2020 to 2022. Nobody was going to conferences or meeting in person. But yes, you can and should do both. So actually, during the pandemic, when that was also the time I moved from San Francisco to Reno, Nevada. So I had physically removed myself from being close to a lot of my clients anyway. Plus, it was COVID and the pandemic. So I would reach out to potential clients and existing clients and say, hey, things are crazy. We can't necessarily get together like we normally would. Would you like to just have a virtual cocktail?
Mm.
And we literally would meet at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, like on Zoom. We'd
Yep.
each bring our own glass of wine or cocktail. And we talk about a little bit about work, but mostly about, well, how are your kids holding up? And, oh, you got a new puppy. And, what are you going to do when coming out of this? And, whatever. And it was still about maintaining and strengthening the relationships through a virtual cup of coffee or a virtual cocktail.
Yep.
And that's still a good method for developing relationships. Also, when you go to any sort of online event, whether it's a virtual summit, like I just was participated in this weekend, or maybe it's a workshop, like one of the workshops that I lead, we do introductions and we send out, at least this is the way we handle it through my other business, is we, at the end, as the follow-up notes, we say, these are the 10 people who were in the workshop. These are the links to their LinkedIn profiles. We encourage you to network, connect with each other on LinkedIn, have a virtual cup of coffee. You never know where your next lead or referral is going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have also talked about the power of weak ties
Yes.
before. You have to continually plant new seeds and establish weak ties because you just don't know which seeds are going to grow and which ones are not.
Yeah. Yeah. The weak tie is a very interesting concept, and it sort of leads to things like discussion about the Dunbar number, which is 150. It's like the size of a tribe. So the Dunbar number is about, a tribe is typically 150 before it starts to actually break up, because you can't maintain strong relationships more than that sort of number. It's like a rule of thumb. But of course, social media has tried to challenge that number and break it by, okay, can we have relationship with thousands of people in the relationship? And the answer to that is no. But can people hear about thousands of people, and maybe hundreds of thousands of people can hear about you? Yes, the answer to that is yes. But of course, we've had social media show up, which basically, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, their idea now is the original town square that was healthy and great that Twitter started and Facebook and Instagram, developed and evolved. The reality is that they are forcing you to use their algorithms to put you into their feed. So they actually give you information you want rather than you connecting with people you do want to hang out with.
Yes.
And there's a real danger and there's a real movement, I think, emerging about the news feeds of the big giant social media players and how dangerous they are to take us into rabbit holes and sell you more stuff, create more drama, more hate, more polarization. So despite being a social media influencer back in the day, before even the word in social media influencer was created, I was one of those. And I actually I hardly ever go into a social media stream. I know I'm being played. So it's really interesting, though, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, but you've got to make sure that you're playing it rather than you being played by it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
And
I kind of like the concept of hashtags though, right?
yeah.
Because if I, even on LinkedIn, if I go in and type in a hashtag, let's say it's hashtag pay less tax, then I'm going to find the content and the people I'm interested in following or learning about on that subject. Or my favorite hashtag, solopreneur success, which is mostly my stuff. Shameless plug there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the concept of hashtags because then you can filter out all the other, I'm going to call it junk, all the other junk.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go on to you don't want to work for everyone. You just want to work with the customers you want to work with, really, isn't it? Like, so what's your ideal customer profile, which is an acronym ICP, um, which I hate acronyms because it's usually industry speak, and then someone uses it in a book and doesn't explain what it means. You're going, what are you talking about? Um, but I digress. So what's your ideal customer profile?
Personally, for me,
Yeah, for your
since
business. Yeah.
from my business, and I actually have I call it 2.5 businesses, Jeff. So I have the one that how I really make my money, which is a matchmaking agency for self-employed consultants who specialize in organizational effectiveness. It's called the Proco Agency. And we match those consultants with Fortune 500 needs and clients. We handle their
Right.
contracts, their compliance, the insurance, all the red tape.
Right.
So that's really how I make the most of my money. That said, I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations of that business anymore.
Hmm.
So about 8 years ago, I started something called the Professional Independent Consultants of America, PICA for short, because 17 syllables is way too long for a business name. And PICA is a educational organization and community to help people launch and run and grow their own solopreneur businesses.
Hmm.
As a result of coaching thousands of people through PICA, that's when I thought, wow, if I actually put all this knowledge into a book, I could reach and help a whole lot more people. And that's how I came up with the book, Succeeding as a Solopreneur. Uh, so that's the point. Business is point five, is now it's the book.
Hmm.
So you had your original question was my ideal client or ideal customer profile. So most solopreneurs that I can help
Hmm.
are mid to late career professionals.
Hmm.
So that would put you at what, anywhere from 40 to 45 to 75, 80. I do coach, I've coached lots of people who have fully retired, and a year later they're bored out of their minds. And they're like, okay, I think I want to do a little consulting, but I might not want to go all in. And how would I have set this up? And so that would be my ideal customer profile. 100% of these people are college educated. I'd say maybe another half of that group is advanced degrees. I've
Hmm.
coached people with combined MD, PhDs. Honestly, I'm so blessed. I get to coach some of the most intelligent people in the world, and it's just the best job ever, even though I make very little money at it.
Well, there's the thing about like you do stuff because you enjoy it, and then the other question you need to ask is how much is enough?
Yes, exactly. So now I've come to terms with it. So I turned 60 this year. I published the book. I had a little life crisis in that I realized I am 120% burnt out. I've
Hmm.
been grinding for decades, building two businesses, writing and publishing a book. I'm exhausted.
Hmm.
And that question has come up. Well, how much is enough? And financially, I have enough.
Hmm.
So why don't now I just do the work that I really love and continue to mentor and help people launch and grow their own businesses so they can live the life they want?
Yeah.
And the term that was introduced to me just a few weeks ago is called joy fuel.
Hmm.
What's the fuel? What's the work that just gives me joy and lights up my day, and I can do that a couple hours a day and then go about the rest of my life.
Mm.
So really helping people live the career of their dreams is my joy fuel.
Mm. It's fantastic. And I think there's a question we need to ask each other, or ourselves, much more often rather than just nose to the grindstone, copying everyone else instead of
Yes.
following your own bliss, which is a term used by Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. He says that none of us really have this big God-given purpose that, it's only one purpose for you to do. It's like his term for it was follow your bliss. For me, in looking at what he did and also what I've experimented with, is following your curiosity that actually brings you joy. What am I curious about? And then lean into that. And what I've discovered by leaning into that with intent and acting on it, and then creating and sharing, means that the world seems to show up in a in a magical way. And it's worked for me for the last 16 years since 2008. So that for me, and basically joy fuel, I totally agree with it. And uh, like there's a lot of people go, well, just follow your passion type of thing. Well, it's a little bit more than that. Uh,
Yes.
it's I love the model of the ikigai, which is basically, this is a Japanese term about where your purpose lies. And I've written about it quite a few times. And I think that way of describing, where's your expertise? What are you curious about? What do you love doing? And then that intersects with what the world will pay you for.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah. So that's the little part that quite often is just follow your passion. And, like I love gambling on sports. Well, that's not going to pay well unless you actually start a sports app, gambling app, right? Which could be part of that story. But um, so
Yes, yeah, there needs to be a market for what it is. If you truly need to make a living doing what you're doing, and if most people are looking to step into self-employment in their, in their 40s or even 50s, they probably are still looking to make a decent living.
yeah,
So that intersection of, what does the world actually need, or what does the market need, and what are they willing to pay for is very, very important.
you're
You
required
might
to,
be
yeah,
the world's best person at underwater basket weaving, but there is very little market for that. So that's
that's right.
probably not the right passion to follow.
Exactly. So let's move on to the latest technology, which is in front of our eyes at incredible speed and velocity, and has only emerged in the last 2 years, AI.
Yes.
So does AI help you to be more productive, and how do you use it if you actually are using it? And I'm sure you are, because you want to be more productive. So how are you using AI for yourself today in your business?
I wouldn't say I'm a heavy user, or maybe even not even a daily user, but when I use it, boy, is it an accelerator.
Mm,
So my favorite tool is Claude.ai,
mhm,
because I talk to Claude like a real person.
mhm,
Hey, Claude, I need to write a blog on how to, the best tips or the best way to announce to the world that you've started your own business as a solopreneur. My
mhm,
target audience is XYZ. I want it to be about 1,200 words. I've got, snippets from these, or transcripts from these, 3 webinars that I did recently. Can you please write a first draft?
mhm,
That just saved me 2 hours
mm.
easily,
Yeah.
right? Or my normal editor. So I publish my meaty blogs once a month, and my normal editor. Well, okay, it was my fault. Last month, I got it done too late, and my editor said, I don't think I can get this to you by end of day tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I'll just I'll figure something out. So I uploaded the blog to Claude.ai, told them the demographics of my audience, the education level, what the tone is they usually do. I might have even included, here's a couple of the blogs I published in the past to give you an idea of my voice. Can you please edit this for me? It took less than 2 minutes.
Mhm.
And it was a redlined version, and I incorporated 90% of those edits. And I
Wow.
thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to use my human editor again.
We, we, she's not listening. I'm sure she doesn't know that you're going to do that.
I don't know. But I was amazed. And
Mm,
then I need to generate titles. Generate an SEO friendly title for this blog, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I get 10 to choose from. So that's one way that it's totally changed how I work.
mhm,
Um, and and I use voice assistants a lot. And this is a super almost silly way. But I've got my hands on the keyboard and in the middle of writing something, whether it's an email to somebody or a blog, whatever, and I'll say, Alexa, what's 2062 divided by 43?
mhm.
And I don't have to take my hands off the keyboard.
Right. Okay.
I just love that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I keep lists and I keep notes and I do a lot of them just verbally,
Mm,
right? Because then I'm not distracted. I don't have to like move to a different screen or whatever. I can just go and it helps me stay in my in my flow
Hmm.
a little bit better.
Very cool. That's some great tips, and I'm sure we'll that'll be in the show notes along with the actual audio and video. So, in fact, we turn the video, long video, into short snippets done by AI as well that we put up as Instagram Reels, TikTok, and also as YouTube Shorts. So, yeah, it's just fun to experiment with it, and like some are good, some are ugly, some are better than others. So it's fun to experiment, isn't it?
Yes, and the more you use it, the better you get at it.
Exactly.
Or and I think we get better. I don't think it gets any better. I think we get better at giving it the prompts, and it learns, if you have a paid account, it learns from you.
Yeah. Yeah, the challenge at the moment, I think, is that it's very good at short-term memory, which means that on the topic that you started the questioning, it's learning from you. So that's the short-term memory of it. It still hasn't got to long-term memory yet. In other words, remembering all the stuff that you talk about every day and weaving into one, as in it becomes your long-term memory. Because at the moment, I think it's the cost of maintaining that database of information about each individual would be horrendous at this stage. But anyway, that's another topic. So,
Another topic.
so uh, tell us about the book, because you did that with ink, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how did the writing that book, The Solopreneur, success? What led you to that, and uh, when did it come out? It was this year, wasn't it?
Yes, it came out in March of 2024 this year.
Yeah.
It did. And so it was kind of a long journey. Well, the whole thing was a long journey. I've been working on it, living it for 20 years, right? I had to live all the lessons before I could create the book, and I had to experience the content and coach 1,000 people and
Yep.
whatever. So yes, it was 20 years in the making. But by the time I actually sat down and said, okay, I need to publish this book, it was probably 2 years from start to publication.
Yep.
I really hate to write, which is why I love Claude.ai. And maybe I could have done it with a tool like Claude, which didn't exist when I started writing this book, or at least I didn't know about it. So I hired a ghostwriter,
Hmm.
and I said, okay, here's, I don't know how many blogs I sent her. Here's 30 blogs. Here's the transcripts from the 6 core workshops that I lead for the Professional Independent Consultants of America. And here's the outline. I knew what the 6 keys to success were. And so I need all of this disparate stuff to go into this outline.
Hmm.
And then I spent probably about 10 hours maybe, where she would have conversations with me, and she teased out the stories and the lessons learned and sort of the color commentary
Hmm.
of what's of the lessons in the book, right?
Right.
And then there was a brutal round of editing with a live person. And I say brutal because that was all done in via Zoom live, where one person would read the text and then the editor would say, no, that sounds weird, or that's too much passive voice. We need to rewrite it, blah, blah, blah. So the editing was by far the hardest part. And then I needed to find a publisher. I was either going to self-publish or use a hybrid publisher. Knew I was definitely not going to do a traditional publishing, because that's what would have added another 2 years onto the project plan. Plus, you have more control if you self-publish, hybrid publish, etc. So I knew I wanted to do hybrid publishing, and so I did a Google search, top 5 or top 3 hybrid publishers for business books,
Hmm.
and one of them that came up was Greenleaf Book Group,
Hmm.
and they are affiliated with Fast Company and Inc.com.
Okay, right. Okay.
So I paid to have the book published, and Inc. gets a percentage of every book or audiobook or ebook, whatever is sold.
Hmm.
And that's how it was published as an Inc. original. Now, it wasn't a shoo-in. They had to send it to Inc. and they had to review it and whatever, all those sort of things. But that's how it got published as an Inc. original.
Cool. All right, let's get to the essence of the book then. What are the 6 key steps to succeed as a solopreneur then?
They're all interrelated, but they cluster into three sections. So the subtitle of the book is uh, 6 Keys to Taking the Leap, Winning Clients, and Building Wealth.
Hmm.
And so roughly the 6 keys go along those three main themes.
Hmm.
So the first key straight out of the gate is be prepared to vanquish FUD, which you mentioned in your introduction,
Hmm.
which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yep.
If you haven't yet taken the leap into self-employment, or you're very new to self-employment, FUD is larger than life. I call it the FUD monster because I imagine this little gremlin creature whispering in my ear, like, who are you to start your own business? Who are you to negotiate a contract? Who are you to like publish a newsletter? Whatever it is,
Hmm.
that self-doubt will chew away at you, and you've got to learn how to tame it, or
Hmm.
you will not be successful. It takes
Yep.
a humongous amount of confidence to be self-employed. You don't have to know everything. You just need to have the confidence to know that you're smart enough to figure it out or get the answers you need.
Hmm.
So be prepared to vanquish FUD is number one, and there's tips in there for how to vanquish the FUD. The second key is to be known for something and be memorable. A
Hmm.
lot of people think they need to go to market as a jack of all trades, so they're available for more work. But the reverse is true. Nobody wants to hire a jack of all trades. They want to hire an expert,
Hmm.
particularly in consulting. If a client's going to spend $50,000 to solve their problem, they don't want to hire somebody who has done it once or twice before. They want to hire the person
Hmm.
who this is their sweet spot.
Yep.
So that's the second key. The third key is to constantly grow and nourish your network. We
Hmm.
already talked about that.
Yep.
Establishing more weak ties and developing relationships. The fourth key is to be professional and set yourself up as a business.
Hmm.
So there's a ton of freelancers out there, a million subcontractors. You know, when you go to market as a subcontractor, you're giving up at least 35%. Well, okay. It depends if you find your work through a platform or an agency. If you find your work through a platform like Catalent, uh, you're giving up 25% of your income.
Hmm.
If you could find your work through an agency, you're giving up sometimes as much as 50%.
Wow. Yep.
If you set yourself up as a business and can be hired on a business to business basis, in the United States, that's a 1099 basis, tax basis, you get to keep more of what you earn.
Yep.
So that's the key number 4 is be professional, set yourself up as a business. Key 5 is to be confident and charge what you're worth.
Hmm.
I'd say the single biggest mistake I see people make is they don't charge enough,
Yes.
which of course ties to confidence, but there's other ways to figure out and calculate what is a reasonable price for your services and or expertise.
Yep.
And then key 6 is to pay less tax and keep more of what you earn. I will say that key number 6 is particularly US centric.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's very, very important to pay as little tax as possible. I'm
Yep.
not saying you shouldn't pay your fair share, but when you have your own business, there's certain things in the States, for everything from business owner tax deductions to retirement plans that to lower your effective tax rate that can make a huge difference.
Exactly.
And
So,
and building wealth over time. Yeah.
yeah. So there's so we want to do tax minimization, but we want to do tax avoidance as two different things.
Yes, it's not a tax scheme, it's a tax strategy.
And the other thing you mentioned, which is very important, is to build wealth over time. In other words, as Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett will talk about all the time, is the power of compounding.
Yes.
Okay, so be willing to, take the slow, not the quick way to riches, which most people want to do, but is actually saying, okay, I'm going to play the long game here, and that comes down to investing as well. It's like, okay, let's just invest and let that 9.9%, index, share fund return just keep working every year and just keep putting it back in. Uh, and the power of compounding is incredible. I came across, it was one of our leading financial newspapers here in Australia called the AFR Weekend Review, and it showed the difference between uh, the American index share fund, which generated over the last 30 years 11.9%, the Australian index share fund 9.9, a difference of only 2%. And they show the difference over 30 years of just $10,000 put into both of those, what it would
Mhm.
return. So this is where this is where compound gets very, very exciting and sexy, actually, in that the Australian share index fund would have earned $134,000. Pretty good. 30 years, $10,000 down, nothing pulled out, just let it keep, all the dividends put back in, all that. 11.9, 2% difference. The compound growth of $10,000 ended up being $235,000.
Extra 100K.
Exactly. So the power of compounding is what people need to really seriously consider, which means starting maybe I think in America you call it a 401. We call in Australia, we call it superannuation, is just putting money in and letting it
Yes.
work.
Well, let me share my favorite trick, Jeff. So the first year I was a solopreneur, self-employed, was in 2004. And when you're self-employed in the States, you have to file your taxes quarterly, pay your taxes quarterly, because it's not being withheld from your paycheck. So I got caught flat-footed. I hadn't been saving money for this quarterly tax payment, and I don't remember now what it was. It was $12,000 or something. I didn't have $12,000. I don't remember what I did to scrape it together, because you definitely do not want to pay those things late, because penalty and interest is ridiculous. I probably borrowed money from a brother or something, but I said, okay, I'm never going to get caught short again.
Yeah.
And so I took half in those early years, I took 50% of every invoice that was paid and I put it into a separate bank, not my normal bank. Because when I log in and I see I have $10,000 in savings, I'll tell my daughter, oh, we've got enough to go on vacation to Hawaii, right? I have no fiscal discipline whatsoever. So I had to put it into a completely different bank. So then when it was time to pay my quarterly taxes, I would transfer the 12K, 15K, whatever it was, to my normal bank and I'd pay my taxes. Then the annual tax return comes around and I would, lo and behold, have $20,000 or $25,000 left over in the secret bank account. That's what went into my retirement account. At the time I had a SEP IRA in the States. That's what lowered my effective tax rate. That's the money I invested. And fortunately, I happened to hit the bull market at the right time and bought like Apple, Amazon, etc. But even if you just put it in an index fund, as you just mentioned at the compounding, before you know it, 15, 20 years have gone by and you're like, oh, look what I did. But it's funneling that money off in a consistent way and tucking it away so you don't see it, so you're not tempted by it, invest it, and it accumulates, and next thing you know, wow, I do have enough money to retire.
Yeah. It's I think there's these different sort of what we call mental models that we can use in life, and I think they go across everything, like how we, our relationships, how we invest. And I read Charlie Munger's book, the Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is a copy of Benjamin Franklin's Almanac, I think it was. And it's not a copy, but took off the same sort of title. And at the age of 99, he was pretty wise, and he had about 90 different mental models that he used to live, to invest and live, and pretty amazing. Great book, actually. So
it also makes me think of Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yes. Yeah.
Same sort of thing.
Yeah. Great book. I read it about 2 or 3 years ago. And so one of those little atomic habits I have is exercise. So which I started at the age of 12 and never really given up. So yeah. But I digress again. So just to sum this up, well, thank you very much for sharing how the book started and also those 6 keys to success as a solopreneur. The last question I'm going to ask you is, if you had all the money in the world, Liz, what would you do every day that brings you deep joy?
Not much different than what I would do now, to be very honest. What I really love doing is coaching people one-on-one. It could be, I do these things called Ask Me Anything, 15 minutes for free.
Yep.
And people pop in and they're like, oh, this is, okay, so I don't know, do I need to set up an LLC or not? Or maybe it's, this one woman I had last week for 15 minutes, she said, I've been wanting to be self-employed, but my husband wasn't working, but now he is working, but now I'm just scared and I don't know how to get started. it was amazing how much I could help her in 15 minutes. I say, okay, I want you to go to this blog and do this exercise. I want you to look at this up. I want you to take out a home equity loan before you quit your W-2 job so you have that financial cushion if you need it. And I was able to easily rattle off 5 things. And at the end of these 15 minutes, she said, oh my God, this is terrific. Now I have some homework and I know what steps to take so that I can plan to really make this a reality. That's what I will continue to do until I am no longer capable of doing it. I just love it. There's sometimes people, I have a daughter who's 23, and sometimes they're Gen Z generation, but in particular, we're talking about their life's purpose. I don't know what my life's purpose is. I'm like, honey, I didn't know what my life purpose was until about 4 years ago. Okay. So you just keep trying things, you keep doing things. But now I know that my life purpose is to help other people launch and grow their own small businesses.
Yeah.
That's what I will continue to do until I literally cannot do it anymore. Now, would I like to have an extra $1 million in the bank? Yeah, of course I would. But that wasn't the answer to your question. That's not what you asked.
So what you're doing every day is making a difference to their lives, and that brings you joy.
It brings me joy. And maybe I only do it for 2 or 4 or 5 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I can go play golf, or I can go skiing, or I could travel. My partner is retired, so he wants me to be more available to do these things. And as we get older, it is more important to spend more time together. And we actually have a physical, well, it's a spreadsheet, it's a bucket list. We have these things written down and we have it prioritized. Some of these things we need to do while we're younger, while we can, like helicopter skiing, swimming with sharks. We know I not be wanting to do these things in our 80s. So yeah, we're working on the bucket list.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz, for sharing your insights, experience, and expertise and passion about what you love doing and are doing. And thank you for sharing what brings you deep joy. And thank you. And the book is Succeeding as a Solopreneur, and I would recommend everyone go and read it. It is an entire lifetime experience written and distilled into a single book. And that's what I love about books. So thank you, Liz, for putting that book together, and thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. The easiest way to find the book is to go to 6keys.info, not 6keys.com, because that was too expensive. So
Okay.
6keys.info.
Great. That'll be in the show notes too. So thanks, Liz, and look forward to maybe dropping to Reno, Nevada one day and saying hi.
As you pass through to Lake Tahoe.
I want to go to Lake Tahoe, actually. I've got a bucket list. I just need to actually make it a bit bigger because, yeah. Anyway, that's another story. So
Yes,
thanks, Liz. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I agree. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.